Grab some coffee, a Mountain Dew, maybe both. A storm is brewing. The Brainstorm. Welcome to The Brainstorm with Matt and Mike.
Hey, welcome to The Brainstorm with Matt and Mike. It's a show where we use our decades worth of experience to kind of help you possibly avoid some roadblocks or at least some speed bumps in the business arena. Today, we have a great guest and a friend of mine on the show. We've known each other for quite a while. They're clients of ours as well. It's Billy Lawing-Deacle with Roper Staffing. She is the Director of Operations. She's located here in the Columbia market, but they have really covered the state. Billy, I really appreciate you joining me on today's show.
Appreciate you having me, Matt.
Yeah. You and I have had a lot of conversations over months and years about just staffing in general. As we watch the economy go up and down, and this year has been a crazy year, right? I mean, we went from one of the best economies from an unemployment perspective in the last 50 years immediately into the worst month that we've ever seen as a nation in unemployment, all because of the pandemic, COVID-19.
Right.
I bet you were just about, I'm surprised you still have hair. I'm surprised your hair doesn't look like my hair.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
It definitely, I talk about a white knuckle thrill ride. I think
man.
Anybody who's in any type of business, we had to be buckled up for this year. I think everybody's holding their breath and waiting for 2021. It definitely took us all by surprise, and it was definitely crazy.
Yeah, just talking about a roller coaster ride, that is crazy. But first, before we dive too deep into the whole unemployment rate and all that type of stuff, especially knowing that we literally just went through an election here recently. Talk to us a little bit about Roper Staffing, because there's a lot of employment agencies that people see or possibly know or possibly even used before, and then you have businesses that are trying to hire people. I mean, finding good quality people is a major problem, and it's been that way for quite some time now. But talk to us just a little bit about Roper Staffing, your geographic coverage, how long you guys been in business, really what you specialize in.
Okay, awesome. Roper has been serving the Midlands of South Carolina since 1982. We were, little trivia, we were the first staffing agency in Lexington County.
Oh, wow.
Yep,
how about
absolutely.
I didn't know that. That is good trivia.
Yeah. We have 6 locations throughout the state. We have Lawrence in the upstate, Newberry, Union, Sumter, Columbia, and Somerville.
Okay, so you have some major markets, and then you have some, what I would call some more suburbia type of markets, which is really good, because a lot of agencies, no matter staffing or whatever, a lot of those agencies would usually just go post up in like the larger cities, and that's it.
Right.
And so you guys are looking a little bit more suburban in some of those markets, if not the majority of those markets, which is really good, because you're serving, I think, a large population that is very underserved.
Right.
Was that the purpose of opening up in those areas?
Right. And being able to have that local recruiting source.
Okay.
Anybody can do it kind of remotely.
Yeah.
But being connected to the community is extremely important to us. We like to be able to be boots on the ground and know the area that we're serving.
Yeah, something to be said about that, because you guys are locally owned, right? So, it's the 6 locations is your business. So it's not like it's like a franchise out of somewhere else.
That's right.
So the culture is South Carolina local, South Carolina culture.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't matter if someone's listening that owns a business or wants to start a staffing agency or whatever in another state. I mean, what's so cool about that is you're employing people for staffing purposes in the local market by local people.
Exactly. Keeps the money local.
That's pretty important, actually.
Absolutely.
I love that. So let's go into, I know like I said, we just went through an election here recently, and, the unemployment, a lot of people look at unemployment is the telltale of the economy. It's one of the most significant factors of how the economy is doing. But I know that the unemployment rate is kind of a lagging metric, if you will. It's not predicting what might be in the future. It's kind of measuring what's already taken place. And then based off of that will help kind of shape what the future looks like. And I know in May, of 1953 was the lowest unemployment rate of all time. I think it was around 2.5% or somewhere around 2.5%. Other than that, it seems like the average runs around 5.75%, if you will. And up until February of this year, for the last 50 years, we were trending about 3.5%, which was like I said, the best in 50 years. Up until fear just absolutely kicked in March and April. April was the largest unemployment history of all time in our nation at 14.7. You know, I'm talking about a national perspective right now. I'm talking 14.7. We're talking not Columbia, South Carolina, or South Carolina in general. We're talking about across the United States. And I know that unemployment, correct me if I'm wrong, unemployment is measured on all folks that are able to work and wants to work, right? It's not like disabled people. It's part-time and full-time employed
Actually, it
people.
can have some of the other in there as well.
It can, okay.
It definitely can. And so that kind of skews it. So anytime you're at about a 2.5%, you basically are pretty much your maximum capacity.
Okay, yeah.
And that's where up until COVID hit, that's where Lexington and this area was.
So locally, we were more like 2.5%.
Yes.
Okay.
We basically came off of a year to 2 years of near record low unemployment.
Wow. So that's the reason why so many people struggle finding people to come work.
Right. And so with that, here is, if businesses out there listening, the one thing I can tell you is take a look at your compensation packets. Right now is the time that you've got talent wars going on. Right now, even coming back off of COVID, we still are really struggling to find that talent.
Yeah.
And who pays.
People want good people.
Exactly. And he who pays wins the talent war.
Yeah. We've seen that play out with our clients. You know, we deal with a lot of clients, 400 plus clients that we deal with. And, you know, that's one of the things when we start talking to them about what they're struggling with and what they really need work on. A lot of times it comes down to people.
Yeah.
It comes down, and they don't just want people, they want good quality people.
Right.
And that's tough. That's tough to find right now. Now, from a local perspective, when we start talking about those averages on a national scale, and we start breaking that down, do you feel like locally, when I say locally, the state of South Carolina is better, the same, or worse than what the federal numbers show?
Worse.
Worse.
We have lower unemployment than,
Okay.
I mean,
so
it's
unemployment rates.
Better unemployment rates, worse on as far as the recruiting aspect of it. Right.
Harder.
Right. It's definitely harder to find the people.
Okay. Do you find people that relocate to our state and wants to move in to work, or is that also difficult?
We do find those because with us having the military base here, we have a lot of other large employers. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times as a byproduct, we get the spouses of those individuals that are moving to the area. So definitely when you look at some of the other areas, there's still some states that have a large segment that's not back working yet. And, you know, here in the South, I mean, we have been, we've pretty much been open for business for a couple months now, and our economy is roaring back. There's still some that's not.
Right.
And so, yeah, we do see an influx of some of those people moving to our area.
Yeah. And you mentioned military bases. I didn't even put two and two together. I mean, I knew that, you know, military bases certainly help the economy locally because of all those people that's coming into that military base. But I didn't even think about the employment perspective, being that spouses and family members of those folks. Hey, you're listening to The Brainstorm with Matt and Mike. We really appreciate you joining us today on this show. We have the Director of Operations, Billy Lawing-Deacle from Roper Staffing with us. Billy's a good friend of mine. They're also a client. We did a website for them, some other things that we do for them from a marketing perspective over at Splash Omni Media. Today, we're really talking about the unemployment rate and unemployment factors, what controls that, how recruiting works. We're trying to compare our local recruiting and economy and unemployment to a federal perspective. And Billy, you and I were just talking about what that looks like from a statistics scenario, right? The local statistics seem to be worse in recruiting, better unemployment, which makes obviously worse recruiting because there's less people. And of course, you know, the state of South Carolina, which you guys pretty much cover, the entire state of South Carolina, you know, is not a large state. There's not a whole lot of people in our state, right?
Right.
Comparably speaking
Right.
to other states, that is. So I can definitely see how that would be difficult. You were also talking about that our state's been back open now for a number of days or months, and so that has an impact as well because people are out there getting employed. And I think don't you think that we have a state on average of really people who want to work?
Absolutely. And I tell you, the one thing that kind of hurt us with that whole people wanting to work is the extra supplement onto unemployment. That hurt a lot of companies because once the companies shut down during the COVID scare, the initial COVID scare, people got on that unemployment, and a lot of them were making more on unemployment than they were in their jobs. So when it came time to go back to work, they were reluctant.
So the CARES Act, helped
Exactly.
people, but hurt businesses.
It definitely did. And, and I think, again, talking about that fear, some of the employees, it wasn't necessarily that they didn't want to go back to work. There was still uncertainty. So stay
That's true.
home and make
Be
more
safe.
money. And
Stay home, be safe, make just as much in some cases, maybe more in some other cases, especially in that the restaurant business, right?
Right.
The restaurants is what was probably hurt the worst as far as the organizations, but the people who worked at restaurants were able to actually go and make just as much, if not more, than what they were making at the restaurant through the CARES Act
Exactly.
unemployment. And what was that? That was an extension of about 13 weeks, I believe,
13
of
weeks.
unemployment plus the additional $600
Correct.
a month.
Right, week, 600
week.
a week.
I mean, yes,
right,
I mean, I
600
said a month, yes, a
and
week.
currently, right now, we're looking at an extra 300 tacked onto it. And that's
okay.
still, the extension is still there. So if
When
you,
does that end? Does that have a definitive date?
I'm not 100% sure because
Okay.
I think it depends on when it actually started in the
Gotcha,
state.
yeah.
But you're looking at, on average, right at, if someone's drawing maximum unemployment, they're roughly $15.60 on unemployment. So
Okay. That's
to attract that
depending
talent,
on some
yeah.
businesses, that's
pretty
right. Yeah, that's a premium.
right.
Yeah. Well, when we start talking about that, though, as far as businesses hurting and, the virus is definitely real, right? We
Right.
have, thankfully, we've only had one of our team members get exposed and ultimately be diagnosed with COVID, thankfully. We know a bunch of people, as I'm sure you do as
Right.
well. I mean, at this point in time, what are we, 6 months or so into this thing? We are going to know a lot more people than we did in the first 90 days. So it's definitely real. So I'm not discounting the virus at all whatsoever. But in reality, it seems that the mandated shutdown on businesses is what ultimately caused the economy to shut down as well, right? I mean, wouldn't you say that, certainly the unemployment to skyrocket. So what's your thoughts on what was going through your mind with the placement of employees during that time in which it was 14.7% unemployment in April, right? And then May and June. It seems like to me that shutdown, the mandated shutdown, is what really hurt the overall economy and the unemployment.
Right. Yeah. The economy was trucking along. I think everybody was feeling very confident. And then those words that we all learned really quick, COVID-19 is
Right.
like, what is this? All of a sudden, basically come to a screeching halt. And for us, it was more March versus April.
Okay.
I mean, in a period of a couple of weeks, over 40% of our workforce were displaced. So
And that's a good point because the temporary or the part-time folks or the placed folks were probably the first to be
right.
pulled, right?
Right. And that's what we sell. We are an economic buffer. That is what, it's a perfect way to hire for your permanent staff. But a lot of companies, especially manufacturing, use us as that economic buffer to where we are in and we protect their core staff. So they cut us first.
Yeah.
That's what we sell. And
So that's one of the benefits.
benefit. It is definitely a benefit. And, but our hearts were sinking for the employees that we were having to displace. And I mean, immediately we're trying to find out, okay, this segment is shutting down. Who is still hiring? Where can we get these people back out to
Right.
work? And then also trying to protect those jobs for those employees too, to where at the point that those companies can come back, we would love to get those trained workers back out to work with
Right,
them.
because they're already trained now
right.
at this point, right?
Right.
I mean, one of the I guess most wasted resources is time training and getting someone up to speed doing a
Right.
job. especially in the manufacturing world, because
Right.
you're dealing with safety issues, you're dealing with a lot of times with equipment issues, you're dealing with all types of dynamics that clerical doesn't have to deal with as
Exactly.
much.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I didn't even think about that in that particular case. We were talking about the CARES Act and how that certainly helped a lot of folks, as the employees' perspective, that extra 13 weeks extended on the unemployment benefits plus the $600 a week and the additional funding. But what about like the businesses, the employers' perspective? How'd that CARES Act, I guess in that particular case, like the PPP certainly helped in some businesses. What did you find? Did you find that a lot of your businesses qualified and was able to receive PPP money or no?
Yeah, a lot of our clients that we deal with were gathering information because they were able to use the employees that we placed with them for part of their headcount.
For part of that funding, right?
So yeah, because we are part of their payroll, so
Right.
they looked at that.
That's right, because it was based off of payroll.
Right. So I think a lot of people were able to access that, which was great. The manufacturing, and I will tell you, other than a lot of them went through some shutdowns to try to get some procedures in place. This
Okay.
hit. You got to look
That's
at
a good
most
point, too.
manufacturing companies. It's really hard to social distance. You've got people working assembly lines, or you've got people.
the one on the right, the person on the right depends on the person on the left and
Right.
it just assembles, right? It
So
goes down
they
the line.
they had to kind of get creative, and we've got a lot of people that have the plexi created. Some ingenuity was phenomenal during this thing. We had people switching and going from making signs to making plexiglass shields like Signarama did. Lots of different ingenuity. So a lot of our manufacturing facilities had to basically press pause, kind of get a game plan together. A lot of them went to working a B crew, so that if somebody did get infected or contract COVID, then they could rotate their workforce and not be completely down.
I know that you guys deal with a lot of different industry. You guys deal with manufacturing,
Right.
right? You deal with what, distribution?
Correct.
You deal with
Warehouse.
clerical, industrial, right? So you got all kinds of different, businesses. Is there any that you guys don't deal with, or do you deal with most everything?
Residential construction and things
Okay.
like that are kind of the ones that we kind of shy away from a
Okay,
little
that
bit.
don't place.
We can do direct hire placements on those.
Okay.
But since that is a very hands-on supervisory type of role, and since we do not, it's very hard to control the environment,
Yeah.
and for just the safety aspect of it, it's a little bit hard to control.
What's your percentage of direct hire versus, I guess, temp part-time type stuff?
As a percentage, I would say probably 10 to 15% direct.
Direct, okay.
A lot of what we do, and I would say probably 80 to 85% of what we do is temp to hire,
Okay.
which is like a working interview. Is that the person works 90 days on our payroll, and then you get to hire them directly. You get to see them in your job,
that's best case
in the work,
scenario.
in the work environment. You get to see how they work with the culture and all those skills that you can't really see on a piece of paper on the resume. You get to actually see them in the workforce. So
Oh, that's best case scenario.
It
I know
is.
a number of our folks here were interns with us.
Right.
And then after the intern, we liked them and placed a full-time job. Our VP, one of our senior staffers, she interned with us 10 years ago out of Clemson between her junior and senior year, and we loved her. We thought she was one of the best. And of course, we carry 2 or 3 interns, all the time, constantly.
And that's
we turn
smart.
them over all the time.
That's smart.
And it helps us. It helps them.
Right.
Right. But I know that with Shelly, she came and interned with us, and then she came home for the summer because she actually lived here as well. And then so she was like, "Hey, do you mind if I stay on after the spring semester as a summer job?" We're like, "Sure." And then Clemson University requires 2 off-site full-time internships. So she got an exception to intern her second internship with us as well. And then during that, we were like, "Hey, you graduate next year. We'd like to offer you a full-time position." So she came on. Now she's worked our way all the way from intern to
See, that's
4 or
beautiful.
5 different positions, and now she's a VP with Splash Omni Media. So that long-term interview, that 90 days you're talking about,
Right.
isn't that a win-win for both parties?
It is. And, I'll tell you, people have little blips on their work history. They may have made a bad decision.
Right.
quit a job without having another
that
one.
can be held against them.
Yeah, and so
unfortunately,
with them being able to go in and do that working interview, it gives them a fresh start. It lets them, the slate's kind of clean.
Yeah.
They can show what they can do, and then hopefully get their foot in the door and be able to land a permanent direct hire position with them.
I love it, and that's from the employee perspective, but the employee perspective is just as good.
Exactly.
So, because the employee needs to be interviewing the business just as well.
Exactly, because it's a two-way street. And at Roper, we definitely see that we have two clients. We have our client customers that need the employees, and then our employees that come to us for assistance. I mean, it takes both for my business to work. And every single day, we make a difference in people's lives. I mean, we truly do.
Yeah.
We help those employees get their foot in the door with top companies throughout the Midlands. And then with our client companies, we give them peace of mind. They can go to sleep at night without having to worry about where they're going to find the employees, because they know that Roper's on it and we're going to help them.
I love it. You're listening to the Brainstorm with Matt and Mike. Today we have a good friend and a client, Billy Long-Dinkel from Roper Staffing. She's the Director of Operations at Roper Staffing. She's located here in the Columbia office, but I know they have 6 locations around the state of South Carolina. And really, they have local people working with local people for placement there.
Right.
And Billy, I know you were saying that we have about 80 to 85% are attempt to hire, where you work 90 days on your payroll as an economic buffer.
Right.
You used that language a little
Right.
while ago, which I really like.
Right.
An economic buffer for employers to see if that employee fits their culture, fits their work ethic, fits what they're looking for. And of course, we were just talking about how important it is for the employee to take those 90 days and make sure that that is where they want to set roots, right? Because,
Exactly.
you know, a lot of people, and we were, my business partner, Mike, who's not on the show with us today, he's usually on the show with us. He looked up and found the stats the other day, and I don't even know what they were, so I'm not going to misquote it because one of our viewers or listeners will tell me how wrong I was very quickly, so I'm not going to misquote it. But there's a significant number of employees that go to work and they absolutely hate what they do and where they do it at.
No, I can definitely see that, because you hear a lot of people grumbling and complaining. And, you know, at least here in the South, and especially with the unemployment the way it is, there's lots of jobs around. If you're miserable, go find something that makes you happy.
Yeah,
It kind of blows my mind. I've worked for Roper for 23 years, and I truly don't feel like I've worked a day in my life.
Right.
I mean, that sounds kind of bad, but I enjoy what I do. And, it
Makes a huge difference.
It definitely does.
It makes a huge difference. I mean, when you really think about it and dive deep, you know, if you sleep, and this is all approximate, right? But if you sleep approximately a third of your life away, right?
Right.
And you work, you know, a third of your life away, and you play whatever you're going to do a third of your life. I mean, a third of your life is way too long to be miserable.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just, it don't matter how old you live to be, a third of your life is stupid to be miserable. But then at the same time, I almost feel like, you know, there might be a reason why you're at the place that you're at the time that you're there. And it seems to me that, and it's not always, I know that what I'm getting ready to say is not always the case. So I'm just talking about on average, but it seems like enjoyment and joy and what you think about it sometimes can almost be a choice. Like you could choose to be unhappy, or you could choose to like be impactful. It seems, don't you think? I mean, what do you see in the employment world when it comes to like enjoyment of what people do?
I definitely think it is a choice. I do sometimes think people are in bad situations.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I would definitely.
We've heard some stories from just bad bosses and bad cultures and bad environments.
That pains me.
Yeah, and there are some of those out there. Even with those, and I tell you, I've interviewed so many people over the years, and some of the people have learned the most from the bad situations because they learn what mistakes not to make if they're ever in a supervisory role. And I think that's kind of powerful too. So even a bad situation can be a learning
Yeah, exactly.
Point.
And you know what? Even in a bad situation, you might be impacting someone else that's also in that bad situation. Right? You might be there for that reason.
Right.
I hate to hear about bad bosses because I know that they're all over the place. I'm sure that I've been one throughout my life. There's no doubt about it, right? Not everybody's loved me for sure. But man, it is culture is more than just this term that's been trending
Right.
over the past couple of years, right? It just seems like that term is just trended upward, and everybody wants to talk about culture and how to build a culture. But then we hear so many horror stories about
Right.
bad bosses and bad cultures and bad environments. I mean, for the most part, what do you see? Do you see, when it comes to like people coming in and saying, I'm leaving my job and I need a new job. What's the average person saying? Is it culture? Is it fit? Is it compensation? Is it?
We have a lot of compensation.
Okay.
And again, I think that's where a lot of people are kind of holding firm on their pay rates. And really, you can't even look at last year, what was attracting talent last year. You need to bump that up even,
Yeah.
because again, that if I could have one message heard loud and clear to employers out there is really analyze your compensation plan. That's why people are leaving.
Yeah.
You need to be competitive. Even they may not leave, but they may be ripe for the picking, or a good recruiter can get a hold of them and get them more money elsewhere. So definitely look at your compensation plan. Make sure it's attractive, so that you can't win that talent
And when you
war.
say compensation plan, what I'm hearing is obviously your paycheck.
Right.
But I'm hearing plan, the word plan. So I'm
Right.
assuming that you're talking about your entire package, like
Right.
PTO and benefits
Exactly.
and other
Exactly.
things like that. Is
Salary
that right?
is one of the big points right now. Salary.
Salary is the key indicator.
Salary is very crucial, and then the other things are gravy on top of that. But I mean, I'm going to give you an example.
Yeah,
We
sure.
do blast when we have jobs available, and I'm just going to throw out a number. We have one company who is on the lower end of paying, and they pay $12 an hour.
Okay.
Really not that bad for
Yeah.
entry level positions.
Sure.
I'll send a blast out to roughly 2,500 people, maybe get 25 calls back.
Okay.
We've got another client, same type skill sets, $15 an hour, and you quadruple the responses we get in.
Holy
So
cow,
same set of people.
Everything
that
else is the
equal-
same, like
right.
all the other part of the
Everything
package
else
is the
yep,
same?
everything else is pretty much the same. The geographic areas are close, but just that extra $3 in pay quadruples the response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it definitely is a driving force in attracting that talent.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, Billy, that is a senior executive with a national mortgage company. And he runs the Southeast division of this Mortgage Banking Institute. And he said that they had someone that was only with them for 4 months that left them to go work for a competitor for only $2,000 more a year.
See, that's yeah. Unfortunately,
That's
you've got some
ridiculous.
people that are very short-sighted, and
Oh my gosh.
and then that's when you have to look at. They may have used that excuse, but was the culture right?
Right.
So, I mean, there's
you would have to
so much,
automatically
yeah.
assume that it had to be more than just
Right.
$2,000 a year. It seems like a lot of. I mean, you've already been there 4 months. It seems like it probably just wasn't a good fit otherwise, right?
Right.
I mean, you have to assume something else
Right.
was not right.
Yep.
Because one of the things is age a factor. Does 40s and 50-year-olds are they motivated differently than say 20 and 30-year-olds? Are you seeing any of that type of scenario where, like, I'll give you an example. So I know some businesses that primarily hire 20s and 30s, but they have 8 and 10 week PTO policy.
Right.
2.5, 3 months off paid vacation. It might not pay as good, paycheck dollar wise as another company that does the 2 weeks or whatever type of thing.
And see, we don't really look at the age when we're doing placements.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, this was just
I
with
didn't know about motivation. Are you-
just with anything at whatever stage of someone's life they're in.
Okay.
Different things are more important.
Gotcha.
I think
Yeah.
I
So
think
if you-
time off is
you're
probably
responsible for a family,
Right.
then you're the primary breadwinner. Then bringing
Salary.
home the bread is
Right.
important, right? Whereas
Exactly.
if you're single, right, a couple of $2,000 or $3,000 more versus an extra 4 weeks off of paid vacation
Right.
might not be as important. That's good. So it really
Yeah.
just depends on what they are, where they are in life.
And that's the same thing, like people that we have a set population that really like to work just temporary work. I mean, so
Okay, yeah.
those individuals, I mean, they're really interested in the flexibility. So they can take a temp assignment for a couple weeks, travel with their husband or their wife, whichever way, it could be
Yeah.
a male or female. And they've got that flexibility built in. So it just depends on where you are in your stage of life and,
Yeah.
and what your number one motivating factor is.
So there are people, but based off what you're saying, that would prefer that temp type of scenario versus a full-time employment because of where they are in life.
Right. Teachers during the summers.
Oh, yeah.
We get those.
They have to, 'cause they've got a full-time job in
Right.
the other
They
9
like to
months.
they like to temp during the summer in between
Yeah.
vacations. Retirees that want to have something to do, but not
Okay.
a definite set
Yeah.
second job. So yeah, they
That's
definitely.
a good point. I didn't think about that. That's how about from an employer perspective? You were saying your economic buffer really. What's the other advantages of using your type of service?
Right. The economic buffer truly is when they actually carve out usually 10% of their workforce.
Okay.
That they use as staffers.
And is that a certain type of industry?
It can be any, but it's usually you find those high turnover, more
Okay.
entry level type
Okay.
positions,
Yep.
and they basically say, "Hey, Roper, we want you to staff those positions," and we staff them. And then what's cool is, okay, so we did that here, and then you've got this group of people that are excellent, doing a good job. As you have one of your other core positions come available, you take that shining star, place them in that, and I backfill that entry level position.
Gotcha.
And that way
makes
you
sense.
just you basically have a nice recruiting source there for your other positions, and we just keep backfilling those entry level positions, the ones that are maybe a little bit
Yeah.
easier to train,
Yeah.
and gives you a good recruiting source.
That makes perfect sense. Excuse me. You're listening to the Brainstorm with Matt and Mike. We have a good friend and a client, Billy Lawing Deacle from Roper Staffing. She is the director of operations for Roper Staffing. Have 6 locations across the state of South Carolina. I love that because you guys have local people employing local people, and that's really, really neat. Today's show, we're talking really just all about the unemployment rate and the unemployment factors and how that works from an employee versus employer perspective. Around 4 or 5 years ago, Billy, there was a lot of chatter around the Department of Labor's intention to significantly increase, the compensation for people to be able to be qualified for certain benefits and disqualified for certain benefits, really overtime specifically, right? And I think that was increased all the way up to, what was it going to be, like
40-ish, yeah.
40-ish?
I think it's 32-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I know that really shook a lot of people. That was
Right.
one of the things when the current, I guess I don't know really how it got stopped, if you will, but I know that the Trump administration came in, and I think all of those types of things got put on pause. However that works, I'm
Right.
not necessarily in politics, but in the ultimate dynamic, it seems the Trump administration came in, and then those things paused down. But I know there was a lot of chatter because a lot of our clients have folks like you that help place, and then a lot of them have PEOs that help do their payroll
Right.
and their HR, things of that nature. And so I know that our HR department was like all over it saying, okay, here's what we have to do,
Right.
so on and so forth. But I know that there was a lot of pivoting during those times and of recent times, and this has come up and down multiple times, but the minimum wage conversation does it, first of all, and second, how does it affect what you guys do?
With the overtime scenario, most of the positions that we place are more of those hourly type roles.
Okay.
We do direct hire placement for the higher
Yeah.
skilled type positions. So it really doesn't come to play. I think the people that it really hurts, retail,
Okay.
it hurts the restaurant industry. It hurts a lot of those folks, especially people that have like managers that are salaried. All of a sudden, if you're having to pay them overtime because you can't meet that salary threshold, it really puts a burden. And a lot of companies were going to have to cut back on a lot of staff. I mean, it was going to basically
that's
be
what I
a
heard.
job eliminator.
Yeah, that's actually what I heard.
It wasn't going to bring people up. And I know the intentions, I think, is always, I think
Right.
the intentions are always good. But what it was going to do is have the negative effect in that people were going to reduce hours, or they were going to reduce job loads.
Yeah, job load.
So-
Yeah, so that's what I heard, because a lot of people that we know, and some clients, not
Right.
very many, but some clients were actually going to have to lay some folks off because of it. You would think that, because the intention is for people to bring people up in compensation, which it does in some case, but in some other cases, what it does is it eliminates some jobs, because you can't afford at the same prices in which you offer your products and services.
Right.
You can't then pay out more, right?
Right. So it's gonna do twofold. If companies choose to retain their talent and do that, then they're gonna have to price it. They're gonna have to pass that price along.
They have to price it accordingly.
Exactly. So then you're going to have inflation. So,
Right.
I mean, if you look at all things relative, everything kind of stays the same. It may go up, but then your cost of goods are
Right.
going to go up.
Cost of goods and cost of services.
Exactly. And I think personally, I definitely think we need to do some improvement with with the minimum wage. But right now, with the market the way it is, we're having that effect without mandating it.
Right.
The market is dictating it.
Right.
And I think that's the best case scenario.
I do
because-
too. I don't disagree with you
Yeah.
at all. Absolutely. So what types of jobs are hot right now?
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing.
Warehouse, anything that's supplying. We deal with a lot of companies in our upstate that are distribution centers.
Okay.
And a lot of people are doing online shopping. So these distribution centers have to get that product out.
Yeah.
So they are extremely busy. So those are very hot.
And COVID caused a lot of, I guess, backfill for manufacturing, right? I mean,
Right.
if you don't believe me, go walk into a grocery store and,
Oh,
know,
exactly.
I mean, because you would think, man, if I made toilet paper, like,
We need stock in the toilet paper.
yeah, I mean, if
Yeah.
I made paper towels, if I made like Lysol wipes, if I made
Right.
toilet paper, if that was the industry I was in, you would think that, hey, let's take advantage of this. Let's
Right.
produce it like crazy. But I guess they were having problems actually doing the work with the manpower and just producing it. And so I know cost of goods has increased, like lumber, for
Right.
instance. I mean, lumber has skyrocketed with, cost of goods. And so,
I don't know if you noticed or not, but even within like the paper towel arena, you go in, you used to have like probably 5 or 6 different bound
Right.
paper towels. You have prints and you have this, they're doing one now.
One.
I mean, so they definitely had to meet the supply. They had to change their business model a little bit, offer less selection. So, I mean, everybody's kind of had to evolve. So it's
Right.
kind of, it kind of is neat to see how nimble we can be when
that's a good
forced
point.
to be.
Yeah, a lot of people have pivoted. A lot of people had to
Right.
pivot.
Right.
Yeah, we saw that because, as we go into the holiday season, there's going to be a lot more people that's selling online that has never sold online before,
Right.
which is kind of weird to think that, here we are in 2020 and there's a lot of e-commerce possible businesses that never entered the e-commerce game or business. And
Right.
so they will be now because
Which is good
people
for-
are having a hard time going in physical brick and mortar.
Which is good for businesses like you that build websites who can accommodate that, right?
That's one of the offerings Splash on Media has for sure, is helping people pivot like that. Really just pivot in messaging too, like
Right.
who's the target market, how to reach them,
Right.
so on and so forth. So as we go into the holiday season, from an employment perspective, Billy, what are you expected? What are you expecting over the next 60 days?
Right now, what we're hearing from our clients, and like I said, we're in the 6 markets that we mentioned earlier, pretty much covering the whole state, is still strong. I mean, they are still, there was enough supply chain interruption during that little brief 1 to 2 month period
Right.
that they're still digging back out. Some of our larger manufacturers in the Sumter market, they've already got their predictions through summer and fall of next year.
Oh, wow.
And very strong. And they were kind of a little lagging. Everybody else was coming back extremely quick, and they're just now hitting their orders are rolling in, and so now their demand's picking up.
Yeah.
So we're hearing good things. I think everybody's cautiously optimistic that that we're kind of that's in the rearview mirror,
Right.
and we're focusing on the future.
Right. So what is the process? Let's say that someone definitely wants to inquire from an employer perspective to having you be that economic buffer for them. What's the
Right.
process? How do they go about doing that?
To find the office closest to them, go to our website.
Okay.
At the very top of our website, we've got a locations tab.
And the URL is
roperstaffing.com.
roperstaffing.com. So there's a navigation up at the top.
Right. For locations, find the location closest to you,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll be glad to help. One thing that we do is when that employer calls us is we have a full-time safety director. Our safety director goes out, takes a look at the site, and that person is a resource to that client as well. It's like a free resource if they need help with
wow,
anything
that's
on their
pretty cool.
safety.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We've got that we offer to them. We go out and take a look at it, find out, we learn about the job. We actually tour the facility so that we know the type of person that you're needing, and then we work on getting that right person into that spot.
All right. So how about the employee perspective? What's the process there?
Employees perspective, roperstaffing.com/apply.
Okay.
And basically, it takes them straight to a link as soon as they fill out that short application. One of my recruiters gives them a call, and we can start looking for them something, looking for hopefully their next permanent home with a job. Right.
And I missed this, but from an employer perspective, what exactly, when you start vetting it out, are you doing like any type of assessments on them? Are you doing any type of testing on them? What
Depends on what we
what
try.
they're looking for?
We try to mirror what our clients do, because
Gotcha.
what we want
Okay.
to do is make sure that when we recruit that person for you, they meet everything that you need to be able to hire them. We don't
Right.
want surprises at the end.
No,
So if it's background checks that they need, drug screens, whatever the skill set is, we also have skill verifications to where we can do computerized skills assessments to make sure that we are placing the right candidate in that position.
That's awesome. Well, Billy Lawing-Deacle joined me here on the Brainstorm with Matt and Mike. She's the Director of Operations for Roper Staffing, 6 locations around the state of South Carolina. She just filled us in on understanding what unemployment looks like over the last 50 years or so, what we can hopefully expect coming soon with the economy and unemployment scenarios. Hopefully it just continues to stay strong, Billy, like you're thinking that it probably will. I certainly hope so as well, because that is a good indicator on what the overall economy is going to do. If you're looking to get in touch with her, roperstaffing.com. She's a great friend of mine. She'll definitely treat you right. Go to thebrainstormradio.com. Check out our podcast, our YouTube channel, and contact us if we can help you. Thebrainstormradio.com. Thanks for joining us today.